there's definitely some differences there. This is not like a perfect one-to-one comparison, but looking just big picture at his strengths and weaknesses, it reminds me a little bit of Josh Allen in terms of you've got some athleticism. He's not as big as Josh Allen, so he's not as dangerous a runner in that regard. And he also doesn't quite have Josh Allen's arm talent. But, he's a good athlete. He's got a big arm. He can certainly make all the throws. He scrambles around, makes those off-script plays. I think, I was very down on Josh Allen as a prospect, as, most people outside of Buffalo were. I think we probably talked about this in past years when he's come up. The thing that I think that a lot of us got wrong about that was if you just stripped away like the 5 really bad plays per game from Josh Allen, you had a really good quarterback. And so it wasn't that he was like overall, not playing up to first round level. It was just like every so often he did something really dumb. And that's Cam Ward too. Like you watch his plays when he's scrambling around, he makes some great plays. He makes some good throws from the pocket too. And then like as he's running out of bounds, he'll throw across his body to the middle of the field, like right into the arms of the linebacker. And you're just like, why? Like what did you think was going to happen there? I mean, he made a big name for himself at Miami this year by making some fourth quarter comebacks. But when you go back and watch the whole game, the only reason they needed to make a fourth quarter comeback was because he was so bad in the first half of some of those games. Like the Virginia Tech game where they won, that controversial Hail Mary call was one of them where he just made some terrible plays. The Cal comeback in that late night game at Cal, like he was the whole reason they were losing that game to Cal at one point because he was making some atrocious decisions. So if you approach Ward like that and just say like, okay, we've got a good quarterback here. Can we bring him in and do what the Bills did with Josh Allen? For 2 years, can we just run the ball and play good defense and just like kind of keep those big decisions out of his hands? Buffalo was able to do that because they did have a good defense and run game. And they were actually able to win some games by not really asking Allen to throw a whole lot his first couple of years. Then they just sort of like opened it up in year 3 and Allen took off because he was ready at that point. I think that should be the type of thought process a team has when trying to decide what to do with Cam Ward is to assess your roster first. Like, can we set him up for success over the next 3 years and bring him along slowly so that we can coach those bad decisions out of him? Because if we do, there's a lot to really like about him. And he might be able to hit a Josh Allen-like ceiling if you can remove those really dumb decisions which dragged him down throughout his career.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about these top 2 guys is both guys are prone to take a long time to throw the football, but it's for different reasons. Like Cam Ward wants to hold the ball inherently because he's a big game hunter. Like Cam Ward wants to push the ball down the field. He wants to make big time throws. Shedeur Sanders loves to reset the pocket. And like it's interesting to see how that dynamic's going to come into play because we talked about it last year. We had 2 kind of similar guys that held the football for different reasons, and Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. And for one, it was a problem his rookie season. And we'll see, what happens into year 2 and, what Ben Johnson can calibrate with Caleb Williams. But it was a major problem, even but beyond the Bears offensive line issues. It was a consistent Caleb Williams problem last year, holding the football and pressure to sack rate. Jaden Daniels did have a high pressure to sack rate, but the offensive system that he landed in put him in a situation where he wasn't taking inherent pressures. He was getting, the football out with a lot of screen passes, a lot of quick hitters. And that's kind of the game that Shedeur Sanders needs in the NFL. He's a player that I think if you put too much on him in year 1 or emphasize that he has to play football, like the offense is riding on Shedeur Sanders carrying it. I think that's more problematic than it is probably even for Cam Ward, because I still think Cam Ward's going to give you some highs. But Shedeur Sanders doesn't have that kind of where I look at him and say, like, he has this one elite aspect to his game where it's like he's going to get out and he's going to steer this thing for you. I think he's more of like a bus driver in a sense for him. His best football is when he's playing in confines of the offense. That's why he would fit, I believe, 2 or 3 with Kevin Stefanski, with Brian Daboll. The question where you have with Brian Daboll is, though, is Brian Daboll there next year? Like, we've seen that, with Caleb Williams, right, in year 1, where they kind of give these guys 1 extra year, and then what happens? That coach ends up still getting fired the next year. So I do think it's interesting that both these guys hold the football for different aspects, but I do think that, Ward, the reason he holds the football is a little bit more explanatory because it's him understanding he has a trait that there's a trump card. Like he has a spade, and that he leans on that spade sometimes in college, but it wasn't necessarily a problem in terms of taking sacks and turning the ball over, which I believe like Josh Allen like is coachable, because Josh Allen doesn't have those problems anymore. The taking the sacks and turning the ball over. He still will make a few plays for Buffalo where you're, even when you watch the Sugar High Josh Allen experience, you're like, oh, what was that, Josh? But it's totally far removed from what he was as a prospect. And I worry that the shortcomings that Shedeur Sanders has are more in the Caleb Williams bucket, where I'm like, this could be a problem kind of for him career-wise.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the issue with Sanders too is it's sort of like the way those sacks happen when he holds the ball too long is one of the differences I see between the two of them is Ward will run around, and occasionally he like overestimates his ability to escape a situation and will take a bad sack. Sanders sometimes will just hold the ball and hold the ball and hold the ball and then just take a sack, like for no reason. Like there are some plays I've posted some videos of some of them where he just like the obvious option to just like throw the ball at the feet of his running back or throw it out of bounds is right there, and he just like goes down, and it makes absolutely no sense. He gives up yards for absolutely no reason, and you just that's concerning because he's played too much football at this point to make really dumb mistakes like that. So it does make you question his ability to process a little bit. The other thing that he does differently than Ward is the way that he drifts back so much. Ward will run backwards. Like he'll spin out and he'll run, and like it makes you nervous a little bit, like how far back he'll goes. But Sanders will drift back and back and back, like waiting for something to happen. And that's specifically risky for him because he doesn't have as much of an elite arm. So he's sometimes going to take what like is going to be a 5-yard gain and make it like a 20-yard throw. And so he's just making things a lot more difficult than him. I wouldn't mind him holding the ball so long if he were doing a little bit more of just rolling out of the pocket, because then at least your receivers can react to that, and there's like a scramble drill that you can kind of do where everyone's moving towards the sideline, and if it's not there, then hopefully you throw the ball out of bounds or just throw it at someone's feet or something. But the way that he drifts puts himself into really bad situations sometimes. And there was a classic example of that in the bowl game this year where they were in field goal range on, I think it was second down actually, but he takes like a 20-yard sack out of field goal range. They end up only getting like 2 yards on third down, and then they miss a field goal. Like it was just, he cost them points with the way that he plays in that situation. It was the best example he gave us all season where it like very clearly cost them points on the scoreboard. So you've got to find a way to make him stay in the pocket and get rid of the ball faster. The one thing that you could maybe talk yourself into as like an explanatory factor here is Colorado's offensive line. Now, I'd be the first to point out that Sanders was to blame for a lot of sacks, but it also was one of the worst offensive lines in football both years that he was there. So maybe that was a factor. Like maybe that got in his head a little bit. Maybe that explains some of the drifting back in the pocket, because he knows if he doesn't have someone open in 2 seconds, someone's going to be on him, which was often the case. So that might explain some of the drifting, but it's a risk you take because you can't say for certain that that's the reason. So if he fails, that could be a factor if you can't eliminate that from his game.